Clutter rarely arrives all at once. It tiptoes in slowly, quietly, until one day you look around and wonder how your home became so heavy. It begins with a few magazines you meant to read, a gift you didn't want to throw away, or a drawer where little things get tucked just for now. None of it feels overwhelming at first. But over the years, those small piles grow into silent mountains that take up more than just space. They begin to take up peace. For many older women, clutter feels invisible because it blends into the background of daily life. A crowded coffee table, an overstuffed closet, a box of old linens in the hallway. These things become part of the scenery. But what we don't always see is the emotional weight they carry. Each pile is a quiet reminder of things undone, memories unresolved, or decisions we've been avoiding. It's not just about mess. It's about the way a crowded room can make you feel restless, or how an overflowing drawer whispers guilt each time you open it. And slowly, without realizing it, clutter begins to steal small pieces of joy. The joy of walking into a calm living room. The joy of easily finding what you need. The joy of resting in a space that feels light instead of heavy. This is what experts call the invisible burden of clutter. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. In your stress, in your energy, and even in your heart. Let me introduce you to Ruth. She's 73, a retired schoolteacher who once filled classrooms with warmth and laughter. Her students remember her as the teacher who always stayed after class to listen, the one who made every child feel seen. But these days, Ruth spends much of her time alone in the little house she's lived in for nearly 40 years. Over time, her home became filled with layers of her life. Lesson plans she never threw away, gifts from former students, clothes she swore she'd wear again, and boxes of family keepsakes she couldn't bear to part with. At first, Ruth told herself it was just a part of aging. After all, a lifetime of memories deserves a lifetime of things. But little by little, she began to notice something she couldn't ignore. The joy that once filled her home had grown quiet. Her living room, once a place of family gatherings and laughter, now felt crowded and heavy. Even simple tasks like finding a favorite book or preparing a meal became harder in a home that seemed to hold too much. Ruth is not what you'd call a hoarder. To anyone else, her home looks normal. A bit cluttered maybe, but nothing extreme. Yet for Ruth, the weight of it all has been stealing something precious, her peace of mind. And in quiet moments, she wonders if her joy has slowly been boxed away along with the things she can't let go of. For Ruth, the hardest part wasn't the piles of papers on the dining table or the crowded shelves in the hallway. It was the way those things made her feel. Each stack of unopened mail whispered that she was falling behind. Each box of keepsakes reminded her of decisions she didn't have the energy to make. Instead of feeling comforted by her belongings, she often felt trapped by them. And she's not alone. Psychologists have found that clutter increases levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. For women especially, the effect is even stronger. Living in cluttered spaces has been linked to higher anxiety, restless sleep, and a constant feeling of being on edge. It's like the mind never gets a chance to rest because the environment is always demanding attention. Ruth noticed it in small ways. She avoided her living room because sitting there meant facing the piles she couldn't bring herself to tackle. She felt guilty when her daughter visited because the mess made her worry she looked careless. And in quiet moments, she admitted something painful. She didn't laugh as easily anymore. The clutter hadn't just filled her house. It had crowded out her joy. This is the hidden emotional toll of clutter. It doesn't just sit on shelves or floors. It seeps into moods, confidence, and even relationships. And for older women like Ruth, it can feel like a slow erosion of happiness, one pile at a time. Clutter doesn't just affect the person living with it. It ripples outward, quietly shaping relationships. Ruth saw it in the way her daughter visited less often. At first, she believed it was simply because her daughter was busy with work and raising the kids. But in truth, her daughter often felt overwhelmed by the crowded rooms. There wasn't enough space for the children to play, and she worried they might trip over something or break a fragile keepsake. Ruth noticed, too. The visits were shorter, the laughter from her grandchildren less frequent. She longed for the days when her home echoed with giggles and the smell of fresh cookies baking in the kitchen. But the clutter seemed to stand in the way, like an invisible wall between her and the moments she craved most. This happens to so many older women. Clutter creates barriers, physical ones that block movement, and emotional ones that discourage connection. Friends may hesitate to drop by, children stay away, and before long, the home that once brought people together becomes a place of quiet isolation. For Ruth, this realization cut deep. She wasn't just losing space. She was losing time with the people she loved most. And the joy that clutter was quietly stealing felt heavier than ever. Clutter is never just about stuff. Often it's a mirror, a quiet reflection of how we feel about ourselves. Ruth confessed that every time she opened her closet and saw clothes she no longer wore, she felt a pang of sadness. Dresses from her younger years reminded her of a body she no longer had. Boxes of teaching materials made her wonder if her most valuable days were already behind her. Psychologists say this is common, especially for older women. Clutter can become tangled with identity, making us feel stuck in who we used to be, instead of embracing who we are now. When the home is crowded with unfinished projects, outdated belongings, or reminders of loss, it can send a silent message. You're not moving forward. For Ruth, it was painful. She began to see her clutter not just as things, but as evidence that her life was slowing down, that she wasn't as capable as she once was. It chipped away at her confidence. She started to avoid inviting people over, worried they might judge her. And in doing so, she began to withdraw further from the world. But here's the truth. Clutter doesn't define self-worth. It disguises it. The more the house filled, the more Ruth forgot that she was still the warm, kind, and vibrant woman she had always been. It wasn't her heart that was failing. It was the weight of the environment around her. One rainy afternoon, Ruth was searching for a book she loved. Her worn copy of a novel she used to read every spring. She looked through the living room shelves, then the coffee table, then the piles stacked neatly in corners. At last, she found it, buried beneath months of unopened magazines and papers she had meant to sort through. Holding that book in her hands, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Sadness. Not because the book was lost, but because she realized how many little joys she had been burying under clutter without even knowing it. She whispered to herself, "If I can't even find joy in the small things anymore, what am I doing?" That moment became her turning point. For the first time, she saw clutter not as harmless, but as something stealing the things she cherished most. The simple pleasures, the daily smiles, the quiet sense of calm she used to feel at home. It wasn't a dramatic change all at once. But in that small realization, Ruth discovered something powerful. If clutter could bury her joy, maybe letting it go could help her find that joy again. Ruth didn't begin with a grand plan or a weekend of deep cleaning. Instead, she chose one small step. She walked to her nightstand, the place where books, glasses, tissues, and little notes had gathered for years. She cleared everything away, leaving only a lamp, her glasses, and one book she was currently reading. When she sat on her bed that night, she noticed something she hadn't in years. The space beside her felt calm. For the first time, she wasn't staring at clutter as she drifted off to sleep. She said softly to herself, "This feels lighter." That little pocket of peace became her anchor. Each time she saw her nightstand, she felt a spark of motivation, proof that she could create joy one small step at a time. Psychologists call this the quick win effect. When you see visible progress, even in a tiny corner, your brain rewards you with relief and hope. For Ruth, that single cleared nightstand became a symbol. It wasn't about throwing everything away. It was about choosing what truly mattered and giving herself permission to let go of what didn't. And slowly, she began to believe that joy could return to her home. What surprised Ruth most was how one small change seemed to ripple through the rest of her life. After clearing her nightstand, she felt calmer at bedtime. She fell asleep more easily, and in the morning, she woke up with a little more energy. That energy led her to clear a corner of her kitchen counter, then a drawer in the hallway. Each tiny step gave her another pocket of peace, and those pockets began to add up. She found herself less anxious, less distracted, and more present in her own home. Her daughter noticed it too. During her next visit, she paused at the doorway and smiled. "Mom," she said, "your house feels different. It feels warm again." For Ruth, those words meant more than she could say. Clutter had been pushing her family away, but little by little, the warmth of connection was returning. Even her mood began to shift. She laughed more easily, picked up old hobbies she had put aside, and felt lighter in conversations with friends. It was as if clearing space in her home had cleared space in her heart and mind as well. This is the ripple effect of decluttering. It's never just about the things. It's about how those choices spill over into your energy, your confidence, your relationships, and even your joy. Months later, Ruth stood in her living room, sunlight pouring through the windows onto shelves that were no longer crowded, but carefully chosen. Her favorite books had room to breathe, her photos sat in frames instead of boxes, and her coffee table was clear enough to hold a vase of fresh flowers. She looked around and felt something she hadn't in years: peace. The quiet heaviness that once filled her home had lifted, replaced with a sense of calm and comfort. She realized that by letting go of what no longer served her, she had made room for what mattered most: connection, laughter, and freedom. Her grandchildren once again played on the living room floor, their laughter echoing through the house. She no longer worried they would trip or break something. Instead, she joined them, smiling as she remembered that her home was meant to be lived in, not weighed down. Ruth discovered that decluttering wasn't about losing her past. It was about honoring it while embracing her present. She learned that joy doesn't hide in piles of things. It shines brightest in spaces that allow life to happen. And in that moment, surrounded by love and light, Ruth knew she had reclaimed more than her home. She had reclaimed herself. Ruth's story reminds us of something we often forget. Clutter is not just about the things we see. It's about the way those things make us feel. It can quietly steal our peace, our confidence, and even our joy. But when we choose to let go, even in the smallest ways, we're not just clearing a drawer or a shelf. We're clearing space for life to feel lighter, calmer, and more meaningful. If you've been carrying the weight of clutter, I want you to hear this. You are not alone, and it's never too late to begin. Just like Ruth, you don't need to change everything overnight. All it takes is one small, gentle step. Clear your nightstand, your kitchen counter, or a single drawer. Create one pocket of peace, and let it remind you that change is possible. And as you take those steps, notice how it feels. Notice the calm in your heart, the freedom in your mind, and the joy that begins to flow back into your home. Because the truth is, decluttering isn't about losing things. It's about gaining back your peace of mind, your energy, and your joy in the life you're living today. So, my gentle invitation to you is this. Before the day ends, take one step, clear one space, and give yourself the gift of peace. And if this message touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend who may also need a little hope today. And make sure to subscribe, because here, you'll always find encouragement, stories, and steps that honor the season of life you're in. Remember, your home is not just where you live. It's where your joy lives too.